Howdy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.8 patch notes. So thank you very much for watching. You can always check out timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, and be sure to check out the rest of the content on the channel as well. I'm going to do a support tier list and an AD tier list for this patch also, and then we also have topical guides. We stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a coaching playlist with more than 170 coaching sessions and just tons and tons of other content, so please be sure to check all that out. And if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton with visibility. It's free, it's easy, just takes a couple of clicks, and I really appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So Amumu has been someone that hasn't really been viable for quite a long time in most elo brackets. This is rather gonna help him out a little bit. I mean, 13% pre-mitigation true damage is magic damage when he applies this. It's pretty good. So you might see him with like some triple magic comps if you have a magic jungler and then magic top, magic mid lane. That's a really rough comp right now because Witsend is still very strong. A lot of people are still not getting that item as much as they should, but people are starting to figure it out. And Witsend is an extremely powerful option on a lot of champions, and that really kind of makes it very difficult to go for a triple AP comp. So we'll see. I think there might be some places where you could use him. This bandage toss cooldown is actually really relevant as well. I mean, this is what you max last, I believe, on Amumu. Typically, you might max it second instead of your E. It's definitely not your first max, though. So that means that this 4 seconds is going to be very relevant for a very long time. If you max this first, it's not going to matter as much. It's nice in the early game, but since you're maxing this second or third, then it's going to be relevant for a very long time. And this anti-buffering is really nice too. So what this basically means is if you hit like an Ezreal right before he's about to shift, or you hit a Tristana right before she's about to jump, it will follow them after that. So if something goes unstoppable, then he's still going to follow them. So that's very handy. So, you know, nice change of pace, but I still don't think he quite fits in with the meta overall of junglers right now, which is a lot of times just kind of these hard carry, you know, high damage type of junglers. But if you do need an AP option, he does become a little bit more attractive. He can still just get bullied out early. He's not great at contesting scuttles, and he's going to lose most 2v2 skirmishes. But obviously, he's very powerful with his ult. So if you need an AP option in the jungle, if you have 4 AD, you know, on your team, then he's probably becoming a little bit better, right? He's one of the better choices. I don't know if he's the best AP choice yet. I still think there are probably some other ones that are better. Like Gragas, Eve, Sejuani, that type of stuff, but he's definitely a little bit more in the conversation. Okay, so he's all right. I think he'll get maybe a % or 2 off of this. Camille, attack speed. This is going to help her out some in the jungle, but this doesn't address the main issue, which is that she can't stun camps anymore with her hookshot, which is the big deal because now she has no way to stun Scuttle. She takes a lot longer to clear that. And just in general, she's going to take a lot more hits from camps because she's not able to stun them, especially things like Raptors. She used to be able to AoE stun all of them when she went in. That saves a lot of damage on her over time. So I don't expect her to magically appear back. I still think she's like okay in the top lane. You know, I could be wrong about that. Let me see real quick. I would say, isn't she like 49 or 50% top lane? She's actually 51% top lane. So I still think she's a pretty decent top lane option, particularly if you're against a tank, because she has great tank busting abilities, mostly the true damage on her Q. But I don't think we're going to see her in the jungle again. I think that was already a really niche thing for solo Q. It was good in pro, but like it was so difficult to clear that correctly. You had to kite a bunch of the camps and use your abilities in the appropriate sequence and all of that stuff. So it was hard to jungle with her in general for most people in solo queue, and since they removed that stun, it makes it almost impossible. So maybe you see it in pro play every now and then. Someone will try to break out to Camille jungle again, but I think by and large, it's probably not going to be that great. Although this certainly would help if someone wants to try that. Okay, Cassiopeia. I still think that she's pretty strong overall. I know that they nerfed her Q a while back. She's not nearly as oppressive and powerful as she used to be with that Comet build. But I think that she's still like, isn't she still like 50% or something like that? Yeah, she's almost 50% on the dot, 49.8. So she's already in a pretty good place, and this is a really, really nice buff for her. A lot of Cassiopeias are going back to the Emax and then tier builds, which I think is still pretty legit. And, you know, costing basically 25% less mana later on whenever you do this is massive. I mean, just think of it in percentage terms. Like, 20 doesn't really matter that much, but, you know, when you think of it in terms of 25%, then that is a big deal. So I think this is going to be very, very good on her. If we do see tanks come back, they have tried and tried to get the tanks to come back. They have a couple more buffs on this patch for them. If we do see the tanks back, she can be really good. She's also particularly good against a bunch of mid laners that rely heavily on their mobility. Because that, you know, your miasma that sticks into the ground is still going to be very strong. Now, yes, they did nerf that a lot. The damage on it, the slow on it, everything about the miasma, they've nerfed it a ton. But I still think it's pretty good. So if you have time, if you can get through the laning phase, if you're not going to be under heavy pressure, then I think she can be great. The nerfs last patch to Dark Seal, I think, are going to help her out a lot. Now, yeah, she can start Dark Seal. That's totally a thing. She was an abuser that could use, you know, the Dark Seal plus Corrupting Potion. But she doesn't have to. She can get other stuff, and basically she can't get harassed out as easily as she did in the past. So, especially if you're taking this approach with the Emax. With the Qmax, you were basically a lane bully, right, early on, and you were going for a bunch of early game items. You're going for loot-ins. You're going for the double pin as fast as possible. But when you're going for this tier build, which I think is what a lot of people are doing on Cassiopeia again, then you really just kind of want to scale. Like, you can still harass early on, obviously, but it's not as crucial that you try to get a huge lead as much as it has been in the past. Yeah, a lot of people are back on this tier build, and I assume, yeah, they're back on the Emax. So it's kind of moving away a little bit from that lane bully status and moving over into scaling status. So I'm not sure about Phase Rush. I mean, I guess that does give you the movement speed so that you can run people down and get more ease. I think that Comet was still really interesting. They didn't nerf that interaction. It's just not as good for poke. You can see Jizuke still does Comet, and a couple other people, but it's like most people are back on that Phase Rush. I mean, that does make sense to an extent if you're going to have to fight longer because you need to land more ease than Comet. You know, could be pretty good. So I think there are a lot of good options on her still. It's either Comet or Phase Rush are probably going to be the most common ones. Both of them are good. I think it just probably depends on how much poke you think you're going to be able to put out in the lane, and then also, you know, how much movement speed you need later on. But I'm assuming if you're going tier plus Emax, then maybe the movement speed's more important later on because you're not trying to poke people out and bully people out of the lane as much as you had been with the previous Qmax build. Okay. Fiora, they're buffing her riposte, which is pretty nice. I mean, a 2-second stun or slow is very good. That's going to give you even more time to get in more hits. So if you actually do land that stun, then that can be very strong. And then the blade work lower cooldown is pretty good. I mean, this will allow you to spam this more whenever you're going for early trades without going out of mana. So that's pretty good. I mean, you don't max this first, so the mana is not really going to matter as much as you might think. If it's, you know, some mana off of the first thing that you're leveling, that's a lot stronger than if it's the second thing that you're leveling. But overall, pretty nice. I mean, I think Fiora's in an okay spot as well, kind of like Camille. I expect her, she's probably floating around like 50%. She might even be 51%. Let me scale up here and take a peek. But I think that she's in an okay spot, and she's pretty good at, like, busting up tanks. And there's Camille. She way lower than I thought. I guess she is. Okay. She's at 48%, so I still think she's really good. I think a lot of people, she does have a decent play rate. I don't know what's going on. Maybe she's worse than I think she is, but either way, pretty good. I suppose she could use a little help. She's dangerous to buff, though. If we see tanks come back, you'll see more of her. Okay, the ultimate on Gnar. Now, they did buff Gnar a couple of patches ago as well. And so I feel like Gnar in the past has been someone who's been really impressive. I think Kennen, the thing is he competes with champions like Kennen and like Victor in the top lane for playtime. And it's just so hard to coordinate him in solo queue. Like, you really need to be able to teleport behind enemy lines, like right when you're about to turn into Mega Gnar, and then show up to that team fight and make really good use of it. So you have to coordinate it well sort of yourself in terms of make sure that your Gnar bar is in the appropriate spot, but then also coordinating the engage with your team. Be very good. Now, he has gone up a little bit because he did get buffed, like I said, a few patches ago. So, This is pretty good. This will allow him to make more of those proactive plays, particularly sort of during the laning phase when you want to try to go for those all-ins. 90 seconds is a really low cooldown, so you can really abuse people with that now. So I think that's pretty legit. I did see a Gnar in my game going for like an on-hit build with Rage Blade, which I thought was kind of interesting because they did buff Hyper, I believe, something about Hyper a couple of patches ago. Now here it says he's only 48.6. But a lot of people, it looks like, are still building traditional builds on him. Now, he is getting Blade of the Red King more often, which is pretty nice. I thought that he used to rush Cleaver most of the time. I know sometimes he would do Blade. You could do like a Wit's End. But yeah, having sort of the on-hit build, even if you don't go for the full Gensus. Like this guy is going Gensus, which is interesting. But I think Blade is pretty good, because Blade's pretty good on melee as well, just so that you can stick to people easier. So I could see it. I mean, Cuvée was even getting a Wit's End early. Now, he was getting obliterated in the laning phase. And as you can see, a lot of people get different runes on him, so Jerry's kind of out on that. But overall, pretty good. I just think that, you know, once again, the Kennen is going to be someone that he's competing with. How is Kennen doing in terms of win rates right now? I know he's showing up a lot in pro. Kayle is still up there. Kind of zoning out on the Kennen here. Is Kennen really that low? No. Is he just not showing up under top lane? Or am I just blind? Maybe I'm just blind. There he is. Yeah, 52.3%. So yeah, Kennen's performing a lot better in the top lane. You can use Klepto and abuse that, come online. I would say he has an easier to execute team fight because he can just, you know, flash in and ult, and you don't have to worry about hitting people into walls. You don't have to worry about timing your Gnar bar and things like that. Also, he's an AP option, which is really good because a lot of the top-end junglers that are going to be really popular are still going to be AD mostly. So having an AP top lane helps bring some balance to many of the team comps out there. So he's okay. Jhin has kind of been left behind. They're buffing a couple of things. They're sort of goofy, so they're having his traps last longer. And if you put points in this, then the cooldown goes lower. But I'm pretty sure this is what you max last, so probably not going to matter. He does execute people a lot better now, though. So his fourth shot... is that just on his... No, maybe that's on every shot. So that could be pretty big. I don't know the exact math on that, but going from a maximum of the damage multiplier being 3.5 versus 4 could be pretty good. I still don't expect Jhin to be that amazing right now. I think he's on the lower end of the win rate scale. He's probably at like 49% or something like that. He doesn't synergize very well with enchanters. You really want him with all-in champions like, I guess he's almost 51%. You know, you really want to put him with like a Leona or a Thresh or just something else that can have a lot of kill pressure early in the laning phase. Zyra. Those champions, I mean, Thresh is always really popular, but I think that enchanters are really, really strong right now. And he's not that great because he doesn't use Ardent Censer that well. He can use it. Of course, the attack speed does convert over to AD. It's just not at a great rate. So he's just not as efficient with some of those stats as some of the other champions out there. So this will help out a little bit, but probably not a ton. Okay, Kayle, still a super strong champion, still pretty overpowered. She has been nerfed several times, but they haven't nerfed what's really strong about her, which is that late game AoE true damage and just how hard she scales. And it's so hard to punish her in the laning phase because she can get so many potions off of Klepto, and they're just, people are learning how to work around that. And there's just so much sustain in general in the game that it's very hard to punish a champion like this to the extent that you would need to punish them to balance out her late game. But they are adding some more nerfs here. So the attack damage, the 2 attack damage, probably not going to matter that much. It's okay. This will hurt your early game last hitting ability just a little bit. The armor, the 2 off the armor is actually pretty significant. This is lowering her armor into like Janna territory, like Sona territory. Hey, thanks Saturn. I appreciate it. So that is going to make her more vulnerable to AD champions top lane. So that's pretty significant. And this is her her base attack speed. So I think that this is pretty significant. She's losing 3%. And basically what this means is every time you get attack speed, it gets multiplied by this number, if you don't know how this works. So if you get 20 attack speed, it gets multiplied by this number. You get, 100 attack speed, it gets multiplied by this number. So basically every 100 attack speed that she acquires, she's going to lose 3% off of that. So, or not 3%, but 3 of the total. So you could think of this as what, like 3 divided by 70, something like that. I don't know what the exact number on that is, like 5% or something. Or, let's see. Yeah, it's pretty close, 4.1%. So basically, just think of that as she's pretty much losing like 4% of her damage. So that's pretty significant, I mean, over time, because that is really where a lot of her power comes in. However, they did buff, like Wit's End, which is super strong on her as well. And then, of course, if someone wants to go for kind of the Gensu's build, they can. There's just so many different builds you can do on her, though, that it's really hard to nerf her out. Where was U.GG? I think a lot of people were favoring kind of the AP Kayle with either Gunblade or Ludens. I still think that Blatherin King's pretty good. There's some people doing like Triforce Kayle. Yeah, this person went like Trinity and Blatherin King. More people are going Bork. You do see some people going this. It probably depends on the matchup, but when there's a champion, you can just pretty much slap anything on them in their OP late game when there's like not a consensus about the items. That's usually a little on the overpowered side, especially if they have a 54% win rate. So good nerfs. She's still super, super strong. After the previous nerfs. And so I think this will bring her a little bit more in line. I expect maybe she'll lose a percentage off of those, maybe, but she's still going to be really strong. Also, if you get the Potion of Skill, and I don't even know why they coded this originally, but if you get the Potion of Skill, that's not going to help you get to your God mode at level 16 faster. You have to actually be level 16, not the amount of skill points spent. Why would you base it on skill points spent rather than your actual level? Like, nothing else in the game works like that, and that's just looking for abuse. So, I don't know. It was weird. But, anyways, she'll still be good. Now, this is pretty insane. Shadow Step, 8-second cooldown. From 21. Going from 21 seconds down to 8. 8 seconds. That is crazy. That's so much mobility. I don't think Kayn... Is Kayn that bad right now? I feel like he's alright, right? He's over 50. I think. Now, he's at about 50. Now, most people play in red Kayn, but blue Kayn is very, very strong if you have if you're against a lot of squishies. So that is something that is pretty scary. I mean, I hate seeing blue Kayn on the enemy team if I'm playing an enchanter. Now, this is something that I think you max last also. So having this down to an 8-second cooldown when you're also getting a ton of extra movement speed, and it removes slows and makes him immune to them. You get to 80%. So yeah, I mean, I feel like you can just use this for mobility now. You don't even have to save this, for whenever you're trying to gank or you have engages. You can just use this just to zip around the map and just save time on this kind of cooldown. Now, it is a little heavy on the mana cost if you use it a ton, but overall, I think that's really strong. And they buffed him a little bit a few patches ago in terms of his blue damage as well, but I think he could be a very, very good snowball champ right now. He has the potential for it. So, I don't know. It certainly helps. That's pretty crazy. Now, remember, this only helps blue Kayn. This does not help red Kayn at all. So, this is really just if you're going for that blue Kayn, like, hard carry. So, he'll be okay. I don't think he's going to be insane. But I think he could gain a percentage here, especially in those, like, kind of rare situations where they have like no tanks on the enemy team. I guess that's not that rare in solo queue, but if they have like no tanks on the enemy team and you just want to try to, you know, zip around and delete everybody, then he can be pretty good. For some reason, they're buffing this champion. I hate Master Yi. I hate him. I mean, if he's on my team, he's okay, but he's too strong on too few items. Like, you know, yes, he can't really do a lot early in the game, but the problem is if he just gets to 2 items, if he just gets his Blood Razor, Gensu's, he can just start deleting people. He does too much true damage. He has too much mobility, and he's just too hard to kill. Like, the main thing they need to do with this guy is just, like, make it to where his Alpha Strike doesn't reset. Like, that's the big issue, is because if he gets a kill or an assist, he can just keep Alpha Striking over and over again, and it makes it almost impossible to target him. It actually literally is impossible to target him. And so, I don't know. He's just too good at too many things. Like, when he's doing his thing, when he's really strong, he's just too strong. Like, he can solo Baron, usually off of 3 items. Depending on, I think he really has to have 3. He could maybe do it on 2. But I think he has to have 3. But either way, he can solo Baron on 3 items. So if he's ahead, you know, he's always a threat to do that. So, I mean, what that means, other than just being able to solo Baron, is that, you know, in the mid game, especially if you're losing to a Master Yi, and all the enemies stay in their lanes and keep applying pressure, you can't get back there to ward the Baron. Or it's very, very difficult to do that. Especially as a support, because they're going to keep applying pressure to lanes, and you could get picked off. Because they don't have to take their entire team to go kill Baron. So they can keep up pressure in all of the lanes and just kind of screen you so that you can't get over there very easily. So that's a problem. He can split push. You know, if your team is losing, if you can't win a team fight, he can go split push side lanes and knock down towers super quickly and then escape with his ult. And then, of course, he can clean up team fights really well, too. So he takes objectives really well. He split pushes really well. He does team fights really well. He clears the jungle super fast and pretty safely early on. You know, his only real weakness is early game. He doesn't have any CC, and he can't really gank that much. But he's very strong. I mean, even at Platinum, he's already one of the highest win rate junglers. You know, really? Like, do we really need to buff the 2nd highest win rate jungler? Who's like super frustrating, particularly in lower elos. I mean, this is Platinum. If you start taking it down, you know, into Iron and Bronze and stuff like that, this dude's like unstoppable. He has to be one of the most heavily abused Smurf, you know, / booster champions out there, easily. So, I don't know. I don't understand this buff at all. Like, they need to nerf him. You know, if they want to give him buffs to make him more viable in higher elo, I think that's fine. That's interesting, I guess. I mean, I don't think he's that interesting of a champ to watch. He's okay. But they need to nerf him for lower elo brackets if they want him to be more powerful in higher elo. You can't just give him a straight buff, in other words. Like, if you want to... you know, increase his survivability or increase his mobility a little bit, like maybe lower the cooldown on his Q or something like that so he can make more of those untargetable plays. You can do that, but you're going to have to nerf the true damage on him, or you're going to have to nerf the double strike or something like that. So anyways, yeah, I don't know why they're buffing him. This can definitely matter. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but the fact that you can run through the tank if you want to, or the fact that you can run through the minion wave and just completely ignore that stuff and get to the target you want to get to is going to be very strong in some situations. Okay, Nautilus. This is one of the more interesting buffs. They have buffed Nautilus several times. Now, his root duration is a little bit more earlier on in the game, which is good. And then his Dredge line does 20 extra damage, and scaling all the way up to 40, and now it has a 0.9 ability power ratio. So he's already pretty good, I think, in the bot lane as support. I don't think that he has a huge win rate, but I feel like he's probably more consistent. He probably doesn't have a higher win rate than Thresh, but I feel like he's more consistent than Thresh because he has a much larger hitbox on his hook. They're close-ish. You know, Thresh has... you know, like 1.4% higher win rate. So they're close-ish. But I think this could bring him up a little bit, and this does open the door for some interesting builds. Because now his AP ratios are actually like pretty decent. He's got a 0.9 on his Q. His E has like a 0.9. His ult has a 0.8. So he's getting some decent AP ratios. They got a 0.9 there. Maximum single target is 0.9 here, and then a 0.8 here. So maybe you could go Ardent Censer on him a little bit earlier. This is something I've been thinking of as support Nautilus. And, you know, it is kind of goofy to rush something like Ardent Censer because you kind of want your survivability with your W. But if you play him more for, like, engage and then just peel and run away and don't try to stick in combat as much, kind of like how Thresh does a lot of the times where he just sort of does his thing, but he can hang back and peel and doesn't sit there and just, like, take all of the beating. I think that might be a possibility. You'd have to play him with a bit more finesse. It's kind of like Thresh when he goes like, you know, Redemption Locket type of build. You don't want to be like 100% on the front line at all times. The difference, though, between them, of course, is Thresh's hook, he doesn't have to go in. So you can just hook sometimes as Thresh, and that's enough to make a play. You don't have to go in on that. With Dredgeline, you're going in. So I don't know. It still might be too cute. But I think that, you know, maybe there is a world where you could go Ardent Censer second. Maybe if you go for a heavier tank item, maybe something like a Frozen Heart early against a heavy AD team, then maybe you could go something like Ardent Censer second. Which I think Frozen Heart is criminally underrated on him as well. The thing is, like, Zeke's is so good because it gives your AD carry so much extra damage that Frozen Heart gets ignored a lot of the time, but I don't know. It's interesting. I think that there could be some combination of AP items here. Athene's might also be interesting on him. Athene's does give you 30 magic resist, which is nice. And if you take Font of Life, you know, your AD carry is going to be healing for like, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 damage on hit, and Font of Life would basically double that, so they would get like maybe 15 to 20 damage on hit. So it'll take you a while to use those charges, but in a team fight, if you slow the entire team, then everybody's going to be getting that extra on-hit healing. So I think you could actually, in a team fight, go through those charges pretty quickly, because the healing counts as a heal from you, if you don't know about this with Font of Life. This healing off of Font counts as a heal from you, so that triggers Ardent Censer. So when you you know, use your AoE, put this debuff on everybody. Anytime anyone attacks them, they would get the Ardent Censer buff if you had Ardent. Or, with Athene's, they would get the heal off of Athene's. Now, keep in mind, the Athene's heal can only match the total base heal that you're getting from an ability. So this is, you know, 1% of your maximum health. Now, remember, that's over almost 2 seconds. With the 0.4, you're only getting 40% of that value on hit, which is pretty troll. So if your AD carry is attacking really quickly, they're not going to get the full 1% every single time. So if you have 1,000, you know, AP, or 1,000 HP rather, and your AD carry auto attacks someone, then every time they auto attack, it's only going to give them 9 instantly, because this would be 10 base, and then that would take it down to, or 6 rather. It'd be 10 base, that would take it down to 6, plus 5 would give you 11. So it would only get 11 on hit healing and not 15. So then your Athene's would heal for up to 22 with its charges. So I think that's interesting. You know, the AP is very good. He does have some mana problems early. So, you know, you totally, you know, maybe I'll have to try it out on a viewer's night or in a normal or something like that. But I could see a build potentially where you would get something like Ardent Censer or Athene's. Maybe fairly early in your build, and you could also go Redemption if you wanted to, which would be a really nice team utility. So we'll see. Maybe you just build him like an Enchanter to an extent, who just happens to have a lot of CC. Because now he has such high AP ratios, it's not as troll as it used to be. And you can apply Font of Life to so many people off of that E that you can actually use those charges. And AP is, like I said, not as troll as it used to be. And he has more upfront burst now with his Q. So it's an interesting case. Obviously, an item like Leandri's would be really good too, because your E applies an AoE slow. So that's going to put the Leandri's buff on everybody. The problem is, you know, that's really good and everything, but can you get close enough to apply it to a ton of different people? So if they have a lot of tanks on their team, that could be a decent option. But remember also, if you're going support Nautilus, which is where I think you should be playing him right now, I still don't think you're going to be able to play him top lane or jungle, even after these changes. At least if you do play him there, you're going to have some really bad matchups. But we'll see. This might also change the... change your priority over to Q max second. You don't want to max Q first. You always want to max Riptide first, but I could see a Q max second now since it does so much extra damage. I mean, 40 extra damage is a lot, and it lowers the cooldown on it. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. So, once again, I'm not telling you go full AP every time. I'm just saying that there might be some situations where it could be decent. Especially if they have a pretty low damage bot lane. You know, if they're rocking like Ezreal, Janna, or something like that, you might be able to go away with something a little more aggressive in the damage department. But then also like the Ardent Sensor, if you have a bunch of on-hit champs on your team, that helps. Obviously with like Ginsu users, your Vaynes, your Kaisas, things like that, it's going to be way better because they abuse that on-hit mechanic a lot. But also if you have other people on your team that can benefit from the Ardent Sensor, like you have a Kindred in the jungle who benefits very heavily, or... you know, as any other auto attacker that's going to like that, then maybe that could be really, really good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So, interesting changes. I'll probably try it out. I haven't had a huge, you know, my win rate with Nautilus has been terrible, but it's been a pretty low sample size over the last while, but I think he does have a lot of potential. Excuse me. I'm kind of coming down with a cold or something. Or it's allergies. One or the other. Ornn. Now... this is only helping his late game. I think that he still is going to have some like awful matchups in the top lane. It's going to be rough. As support, he's got some really bad matchups. We played against an Ornn bot lane yesterday, completely obliterated him. Sorry, Jolty. I know Jolty loves Ornn so much. He is a really cool champion. He has a really hard time against double ranged bot. But late game, I think that like top is going to be his best play still. People have talked about him in the jungle. I mean, maybe jungle. They are nerfing Cinderhulk, so I guess it's possible we might see him in the jungle a little bit more. He does have a nice ult. Is anyone playing him in the jungle, though? I just feel like, yeah, he's 47% top. He just has such bad matchups top ever since they changed his W. Dardock's trying him out in the jungle. So not many. But I think that, I don't know, maybe you could do jungle Ornn. I don't know. The Cinderhulk, like a Cinderhulk into Warmogs or something build might be okay, but I still think by and large he's going to have a lot of problems. Now this does give him effectively something like an extra 600 gold, 500 or 600 gold value on each one of these. So, and they picked things that he personally gets. So remember, I think it's when you get to level 13, you get 2 personal upgrades. So if you have Forgefire Cape and Infernal Mask or Iceborne Gauntlet or whatever, you're going to get these upgrades. So pretty good value, It's like you're getting an extra 1,200 gold when you get to level 13, and then he gives out extra gold to his teammates as well. So if the game goes really long, if you have a high-scaling team comp, you know, if you have a Ryze or a Cassiopeia or something mid, and then you've got, I don't know, like a Jinx in the bot lane, maybe you could consider this, but I still think this doesn't fix a lot of his laning problems, but he can still be all right. So this helps a little bit. Renekton, they're giving him just like some really weird, like marginal buffs that don't really matter that much. Kayle the Meek is interesting. You get some extra healing versus champions. You know, an extra 9. You can't use this on minions though, where it doesn't heal for this amount on minions. Empowered healing versus champs. Now that could matter. That's 37. So if you have an empowered Q in a team fight, you know, you could get 121 extra healing. And then the cap is up, so you can heal for up to 600. So it's decent. I think this is going to make him better at team, like mid to late game team fighting. I think he's already like an okay champ. I don't think he's terrible. He's just an early game bully is historically how he gets played. But his problem is he still doesn't scale that well. And we're kind of in a scaling meta right now. So, yeah, he's 50% on the dot. So he's okay. So, I don't know. They're just like, they're buffing these champions. Like, a lot of these are just very incremental, small buffs on most of them on champions that are already, like, all right. That are like 50% or something. So, it's interesting. I don't think a lot of these are that consequential. The main one is Nautilus is going to be fairly consequential. The Kayle could be, although I still think Kayle will be good. Yeah, a lot of these, I mean, the Cassiopeia one could be pretty huge too for mid. So I guess there are some pretty good ones in here so far. Sejuani, now this is one that could be pretty impactful. So this is going to give her a total of 8% total max health damage, and she almost always rushes Cinderhulk into Warmog, so she's going to have like 3,000 health pretty early. So that's pretty significant. Instead of doing 60 damage off of her W, you know, she's doing 80 damage off of that. And she doesn't have a great win rate right now, but she has an awesome kit. So if the numbers just align correctly for her, she always has the potential to start taking off in a meta. I think she's like 49. Yeah, she's about 49%. So there are several changes that have come in. We'll look at the Cinderhulk in a second. They basically trolled us last patch and did not actually buff Cinderhulk. But the direct buff to her, it's pretty good. That's what you max first is your W. That also helps on your wave clear. As it says, this is good for her wave clear, her gank, and her team fight. So it's a pretty big buff all around, and it's spammable. You can do this. I think it's on a 5-second cooldown. So that's pretty substantial. I mean, this thing is basically doing 25% more damage in terms of max health. And if we look at it in terms of an ability, like, it's really strong, right? It's got an AP ratio to it. It also has a decently high base damage, and now it also does, like, even more max health damage. So if we look at something like here, the total is 230 base plus an 80% AP ratio. I don't think you'll get AP on her that much. Yeah, it's okay, AP ratio. I mean, you could do the old, you know, like I was talking about with Nautilus, you could try a Font of Life plus Ardent Censer build if you wanted to. That's going to make her pretty squishy, though, so you're probably not going to do that. Maybe it's like a very late game item, you know, as your 5th item or something that's on the table, or you could go for like a Leandre's if your team needs a bit more damage because you have so many slows and a decent AP ratio. So they're kind of like just entering in the possibility of doing AP damage, but it's still not going to be that great most of the time. So it's a really good ability. I mean, that's something that you can spam on 5 seconds. It's going to be really nice, especially, like I said, with 3,000 health that you're going to get. This is 240 damage. So this is 470 damage. And don't forget, this hits everybody in a cone. So you could potentially hit multiple people in a team fight with this. So I think maybe you see Sejuani come back. I don't think she's going to be like the old school, like 54% win rate Sejuani, but I think this will definitely push her over 50%, and you might see her in pro. I think she has a pretty good matchup into Jarvan, because she can stop his flag and drag with her her Q ability. That's also why Rek'Sai is really strong, because you can you know, knock up the Jarvan whenever he tries to go in. That's partially why Rek'Sai is good into him. So, I don't know. We'll see. This plus the buff to Cinderhulk, plus some of the other changes that they've made to make Conquer less effective against tanks, and just to help out in general, I think could be pretty good on her. So, we'll see how it goes. But overall, I think she could be in a decent spot right now. Okay, Singed. This slow is actually very relevant. A 60% slow is huge on the Mega Adhesive. That's 50% more slow than it was. Like, it's going to be very, very hard to run out of that. So it almost guarantees you're going to get the flip on them if you do that, and that's a much longer time before they can flash or dash, you know, to get away from just stuff in general, right? If they're getting ganked and you throw this on them, it's going to be much longer before they can walk out of that to flash. So that's a pretty nice buff for him. Then the mana cost is nice. I don't think you use this a ton, but this will allow you to take many more trades, like smaller trades, so every trade doesn't have to be an all-in. So it's okay. I don't think he's amazing right now. He's probably, once again, probably floating around 50%, if I had to guess. He might be. Is he higher than that? Oh, that's jungle. He might be a little bit lower, but I suspect he's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. Okay, he's actually, you know, a little bit lower than that, so pretty good buff. I don't think it's going to change the meta too much top lane, but it's all right. Now, Trundle's getting another buff, so they've buffed Trundle several times. Now they're buffing his Q, and this is something that matters. They did buff his W to give him some extra attack speed, which is pretty good. That's the second thing that he maxes. But this right here is something that he maxes first, so having an extra 20 damage on something that's that spammable, I think it's on like a 4-second cooldown or something early. It might even be less than that. Is really good. And then allowing him to subjugate more can be pretty good. So if Sejuani does rise back to prominence, then Trundle is historically a very good counter pick to her. So we might see that. I don't think you're going to see him a ton, honestly. Like, maybe you see him in the jungle some. He does have some interesting matchups. Like, he's very good against Sion and Sejuani and some of these other tanks, but they aren't that popular right now. So we'll see. If tanks start coming back, maybe you get some more Trundle, but his utility is kind of limited. I mean, he's much better on a coordinated team because you can tell everybody, hey, focus fire this person, you know, whoever you subjugate. So he's okay. I think he'll get a percentage or two, but I still think he has some bad matchups top lane. I just don't think he is strong enough in the jungle right now, but he's all right. Okay, Zed, they're nerfing shuriken damage, which is significant. I mean, 10 off, especially early on, is going to be a big deal. And then they're also nerfing his shadow. So I'm okay with this. Zed does feel really strong in solo queue right now. I still think he'll be viable, but that'll bring him down a little bit. Now, this is one of the more interesting changes here. Is this Bilgewater nerf. So now it's 1,600 gold. This doesn't sound like a lot, but 100 gold is a really big deal sometimes. You know, this could be... you might have to wait on an extra minion wave in order to get this, because the minion wave is going to have about that much, right? It's going to have like 115 gold or so in it. So this means that you'll have to wait an extra minion wave on this, and that can be a very big deal. You know, sometimes this opens up a window where the BF sword users can go get their BF. It's much more likely they're going to be able to get their BF before you complete Bilgewater. So I think this is fair because Bladerin King, I've talked about this a lot on the stream, just has such a favorable build path that it makes it difficult for crit users that want to get Infinity Edge because it's so modular. You know, you can go back, you get an early kill, okay, you can go back and get your, you know, Vamp Scepter earlier, you can get your Bilgewater early, and come back. Or you get forced out of lane, it's a tough lane, you get camped, you have to back with 900 gold, no problem, you can get a Vamp Scepter, right? Versus, you know, or you back with, you know, 1,200 gold or something like that. You can get or 1,250, you can get a Vamp Scepter plus Longsword. Versus, like, the BF Sword, you have to back and you have to get the BF Sword or it sucks. So if you don't have 1,300 gold on your back, it's awful. So this can bait you into staying longer. You know, how often is it, right, when you're, you know, the enemy team backs and you're just like, well, crap, I need like 100 gold for my BF Sword, so I've got to stay one more wave. And then you get into trouble, right? Either you get ganked or you get an unpreferable back. They are already back in the lane by the time you back, and then you have to miss a minion wave at the tower just so that you can keep up. So I think this evens out the playing field a little bit more. This also has so much utility to it in the laning phase, right? When you're building towards this, because you're getting lifesteal, which is really nice. You're getting this Bilgewater active, which does that 100 damage and has a slow on it, which is really strong. You're getting the on-hit damage from Recurve Bow, which is very good, you know, with a lot of these on-hit type of champs. And then, of course, when you complete the Bladerin King, it's such a powerful single-item power spike, you know, because it has that, has good lifesteal, good attack speed. Then it also has that slow effect, the damage, and it does 8% of their current health damage. So it's such a strong single-item power spike. It's so modular. It allows you to be much more flexible in your backing, has such great utility in the laning phase. That I think it probably does deserve to be nerfed a little bit. So I think this is a reasonable way to do it. It's just saying, look, you have all of this modularity. There's so many different like back timings you can take to be good. We're going to lower like your best back timing a little bit, the best case scenario with Bilgewater, where you just get to back and get Bilgewater immediately. We're lowering the chance that you're going to be able to do that, right? So now you're going to have to sit on that Vamp Scepter and, you know, maybe you know, grab a couple of daggers or something first while you're waiting. Or if you have a back where you can't get the full 1600, maybe you just have to get Vamp Scepter, Longsword, Dagger, or something like that. All right. I think that works. Yeah, I think you would still be able to buy that if you were 100 short. So, anyways, so this is going to be a nerf mostly to like Vayne, but then like Vayne, Varus, Kog'Maw. There are a lot of, and even like the new Misfortune, like with the Blather and Kings. This is going to affect quite a few champions. So I don't think those champions are going to be in the gutter. I just think that the BF Sword Rush champions, Twitch is another one who gets this first. The BF Rush champions can have certain windows where they can be stronger, where they can get the 1300 back, and then the enemy is going to be less likely to have that Bilgewater. So I think it just makes it more fair, makes it more tactical and strategic, especially at higher levels of play, to jockey for these back timings. It's like, can we force the lane to back at 1300, or can we stall out and wait until 1600? So it's interesting. And then, or can we force them to back at 900? You know, an ideal scenario here would be, if you're one of these champs, to force the lane to back at, you know, maybe push them into tower, you know, on a cannon wave, and then back at like 900 gold, get your Vamp Scepter, force them to back at 900 gold. And then once you have your Vamp Scepter, then you can wait and try to wait until you get the other 700 gold. So then you have the Vamp Scepter advantage. They're going to have to back and get nothing, or they're going to have to get a pickaxe or something like that and delay their BF sword. And then you can probably get your Bilgewater before they get their BF. So it's kind of this game of cat and mouse, you know. With the Blather and King, you're trying to force the back before 1300 now. A lot heavier. The BF sword's trying to force the back at 1300. Or if you can't get that early back timing to get your Vamp Scepter at 900 before the 1300 comes up, then you can try to stall out the lane to get to 1600 so that you have the advantage again, because Bilgewater is going to be stronger than BF Sword a lot of the times. So it's this interesting sort of cat and mouse. So I like this strategically. I think that this is going to add a bit more vulnerability to Blade users and make the dynamic for lane management a lot more interesting. Okay, Cinderhulk. So, they didn't actually apply the change. Why didn't you announce this earlier? Some people were playing the entire patch with Cinderhulk, and you basically trolled them with misinformation. So if you didn't do it, if you realize you goofed up, maybe they didn't realize it. But, like, say something or hotfix it. Maybe they just didn't notice it. But anyways, it's applied for real this time. So this is going to help out Amumu, who's still not going to be great, but people will be trying him. It helps him out. But the big winner is Sejuani, I think, especially with those buffs. You know, this is definitely going to help out champions like Sejuani a ton, because she wants to rush and complete this. Hecarim has actually gone away from this. I figured this might help Hecarim a little bit, but he just actually goes Warrior, which I think is starting to make a bit more sense, because like Cinderhulk, you're getting it late on Hecarim. You're getting Trinity Force early anyways. You don't need the wave clear. Because your Q already gives you a ton of wave clear at that point. So I think it's better that Hecarim does go Warrior now. So anyways, it's really just the Sejuanis. This will also help out if you see like Zac or Rammus. There are a few other tanks that are pretty decent, you know, out of the jungle right now. But I think it's mostly Sejuani's the big one, because she gets this, and then she also gets Warmogs right after this. So I think she gets the biggest benefit of pretty much anybody, except for like Mundo or something. But Mundo is getting played some, but... Anyways, how is Mundo doing in the jungle? Are people trying him in the jungle? I know that, I think it was Freak had mentioned Mundo in the jungle, maybe. There were some people in past patch notes that I'd listened to where they're mentioning that possibility. Nah, he's pretty trash. He's pretty trash in the jungle. But Sejuani could definitely benefit from this. Okay, Stormrazors. This is basically a Kaisa buff. The energized effects are increased by 35%. Slow effects are increased by 40%. It's okay. Not a huge deal. I don't think anyone that... I don't think this is going to change who gets this. I think it's still going to be Kaisa early on. And just like they say, you mostly get it for the specific stats, because you want to double evolve on your Gensus. So I think she'll continue to get it. It's okay. It's a decent little nerf on her, or a decent little buff. But she doesn't get a lot of other energized effects anyways. With this, I mean, she's going to take fleet a lot of the time, but eventually maybe she gets rapid fire, depending on how you want to build her, but it's okay. I don't think it's going to matter that much. Thornmail, pretty good on tanks. Once again, Sejuani doesn't get this a lot of the time. I mean, obviously Rammus is going to get it, so it'll help with Rammus. This is really just something that you don't see a lot of the time. It's okay, but there are usually going to be some better options. And then Coup de Grace. I would say this is relatively net neutral. Like for longer fights, this is worse because you get this extra bonus AD or ability power. So I'm glad they took that out. So that's a nerf in like team fights, I suppose, when you're getting resets. But just trying to kill a single target, this is going to be a little bit better than 8%. So overall, I guess it's a nerf. They did give it a slight compensation buff. So that's good because this just completely overshines every other thing that you could take down here. So maybe this opens up to take things like Cut Down, or I don't even remember the name of the other one. Maybe you can take some other stuff more often, but overall pretty good. I don't think this is going to change the meta that much. And then finally, one bug fix that could be important. I don't know how much this matters, but it says Diana's W no longer deals more than double damage when using the R at close range. So it's a nerf to Diana that she could do. So I don't know how much Dianas were abusing that. I didn't see a ton of Dianas this patch, so I don't know for sure. But overall, pretty good patch. Interesting. I don't think it's going to like change the overall meta too much. We'll see. I think the biggest ones, Amumu's an interesting one. People will try it most likely. I don't think he's going to be that amazing. I could be wrong about that. I think in certain comps, like I said, if you have a double or triple AP comp, maybe you could make it work. Cassiopeia is already pretty good, I think, and this is definitely going to help her out with the mana overall. Fiora, this is really nice. I don't know if it's going to move the needle on her that much, though. Kayle, we'll see. These are some pretty decent nerfs to her. I think she'll still be strong. We'll see Kayn, blue Kayn, in special circumstances where they have like an all-squishy team. I think this is massive. It's a really, really big deal. It's going to help you out with your clear. It's going to help you rotate around the map. It's just very, very nice. Master Yi, why are they buffing this champion? I don't know, but he's still going to be OP. This probably isn't going to matter in a lot of situations that much, but it might. Nautilus is one of the more interesting ones, especially from the support role. Bigger root damage, bigger baseline on your Q, more ability power on your Q. So I think the big thing here is, does this make an Ardent Sensor build a little bit more interesting? Or are you still going to be too squishy to do that? Is there a way that you could... you know, not be as squishy and sneak in an Ardent Sensor, especially if you have something like a Kai'Sa. I mean, that's the most interesting thing for me, is if you have Vayne or Kai'Sa or some of these on-hit champs on your team, but your team also needs Engage, there isn't really an enchanter that does that super well. But now you have potentially an option, someone who has a lot of CC, who can potentially, maybe, also go for enchanter items, if you have some finesse and you don't stick in there and eat too much damage, then maybe that could be something that's a possibility. So, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if you're going to do it 100%, but even if you don't do the AP, you know, if you don't get a couple of AP support items, you know, you could still go like mostly tank with him. Like I said before, you could still go something like Frozen Heart into Ardent Sensor potentially, or Zeke's into Ardent Sensor. Frozen Heart, if they have a lot of AD, would help because it gives you a ton of armor, and that would make up for the fact that Ardent is not going to give you that much survivability. And by that much, I mean any. It's not going to give you any survivability. I guess it increases your shield a little bit. I mean, the 10% increase to shield is actually, like, pretty legit, the plus healing and shielding, because your shield is pretty big. I don't know. It's something to toy with, but especially if you don't need the magic resist, right? If you can just go something like your tier 3 health item into Frozen Heart, into Ardent Sensor. Or you could do, I mean, Zeke's into Ardent would help because then that gives you the extra attack speed and the double on-hit damage, right? You're doing on-hit off of your Zeke's and you're doing on-hit off of Ardent. So maybe that is the build. Maybe you do go Zeke's Ardent. For double on hit, if something like your Vayne or your Kai'Sa is like 3-0, 4-0, or your Twitch or something, maybe that's an option there. I don't know. It certainly makes it a lot more interesting. It opens up the door to get something. I think Ardent Sensor is the biggest possibility of support because it's so powerful, and he triggers it so well with his E, potentially. It's just a question of if you're squishy enough. And then Athene's is also really interesting, like we mentioned before, maybe. Or if you're super rich, maybe Leandri's against a bunch of tanks. Although I think that's out of the budget range of most supports. you know, outside of like serious abusers of it, like Zyra or Brand. Okay, Ornn probably not going to matter. Renekton not going to matter. Sejuani could be huge. Keep an eye on that. Bilgewater is going to matter at really high levels of play. Might matter at lower levels of play. But I still think that things like Twitch and Vayne are still going to be very, very strong. Cinderhulk, great buff for Sej. And that's going to be it. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much. Be sure to check out the support tier list if you're if you want to see more action, more analysis of what's going on in this patch. And come by, check out the stream. It starts around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you. Then that's going to be it. Have a good day. See you next time.